Hello, my name is Armchair Atheist, and today I will be discussing and answering S.J. Thomason's quote, "5 more questions atheists cannot answer." Uh, so let's see what you got for me, S.J.
Hello, you've reached Christian-apologist.com, and this is S.J. Thomason. And today I'm going to follow up on questions that I've recently asked atheists with more questions. I have 5 additional questions.
So that irks me, personally, on a personal level, because I know at the very least Godless Cranium and I think Godless Engineer or the Messianic Manic 1 already thoroughly destroyed your first 11, so I'm not sure why you think these are 5 more questions atheists cannot answer when the first 11 were answered perfectly fine, thank you very much. That will be probably, hopefully, my only little interrupt like that. I've got that just irked me personally. Anywho, onwards and upwards. Hopefully upwards.
The first question is a little long, so hang on for a second and let me explain. Despite the culture or era, sane humans have the innate sense of what's right and what's wrong, and we prefer to do what's right to help our fellow humans. No matter the major religion, we are all aware of the golden rule. We prefer the humble over the braggarts, the selfless over the selfish, and the truthful over the liars. Cross-cultural scholars, such as Gert Hofstede, Fons Trompenaars, Robert House, and Shalom Schwartz, have found that societies vary in ways inconsistent with our innate morality. For example, not all societies are considered collective or cooperative. Collective societies are in Asia, Northern Europe, the Arab region, Africa, and South America. Highly individualistic societies are in Western Europe, the United States, and Canada. Many societies in the world are hedonistic, hierarchical, and have preferences against gender egalitarianism. So, what we ought to do is often inconsistent with what we are doing. How do we know what we ought to do? How do we know it's right to help the needy, feed the poor, and act in a cooperative way? Evolutionary biologists have made observations to show that cooperative societies were better poised for survival, and over thousands of years in the distant past, groups have fared better than individuals. Yet even in historical times, we have examples of highly individualist and highly successful societies, such as those in ancient Greece and Rome. Cooperative societies over the past couple of thousand years have not necessarily been better positioned for survival, because it has been shown that individualism is more beneficial in some ways. For example, a multitude of global studies have correlated gross domestic product with individualism. Individualism also corresponds with capitalism, innovation, and entrepreneurship. So why do even individualists know that we ought to help the weak, feed the poor, and be honest, just, empathetic, and loving? Why is it that all societies, regardless of their practices, know what we ought to do? Where do we get this moral compass?
Okay, so SJ, you just made a claim, then proceeded to point out evidence against your claim that flies in the face of it, in fact, and then asked, well, why does the evidence I just presented you not align with my claim? That is not on me or any other atheist to try to prove. That is entirely on you. As far as what you think we ought, quote unquote, to be doing, I would need you to prove that, and so far you've done a piss poor job of doing it. As I don't think there is any what we ought to do, and you would again have to provide evidence that there is a what we ought to do. But that's not what you've done. You've done in fact the exact opposite and expected me to crumble at the sight of it. That's no. Anywho, next point, I guess.
2. What accounts for the empty tomb and the resurrection appearances of Jesus. Roman pagans, Jews, and Christians in Jesus' time have all indicated that Jesus' empty tomb was found by second-class women. In fact, Paul stated that 500 people witnessed Jesus over the next 40 days after he rose from the dead. Many biblical and extra-biblical sources have indicated that early Christians preached illegally for the first few hundred years in support of Jesus. They preached for decades, braving beatings, stoning, crucifixion, beheadings, and some were burned to death.
Okay, so you expect me to believe that there is no record of the Romans crucifying Jesus outside of the Bible. There was no record of that at all, and with as important of a figure as Jesus was to a lot of Jews back in his day, at least according to the Bible, whether or not they loved him or hated him, he was an important person to them, and by extension to the Romans who controlled that area. You expect me to believe that in spite of there not being any Roman records, any extra biblical records whatsoever that actually would verify his crucifixion, that there are extra biblical sources that say that his tomb was empty, that his tomb was found empty by A, second class people, citizens, and B, women. No, that's not how this is going to work. You will need to provide evidence of that claim. Until you can provide evidence of such a claim, and in fact of the claim that Jesus even was allowed a tomb in the first place, I'm going to have to say that is an extraordinary claim with little to no evidence, because you cannot use the Bible, the source of the claim, to verify the claim. That's circular. As far as Christians preaching illegally, early Christians preaching illegally, why did Guru Arjan, a Sikh guru born in India, continue to practice his Sikh faith even in spite of its outlaw by the Mughal Empire of his day? What about Oliver of Egg? I had to pull the name there. Why did Oliver of Egg continue celebrating the solstice as a pagan in spite of his king, King Olaf II, who later became Saint Olaf, being a devout Christian who had already spoken directly to Olvir and other local leaders and had outright outlawed paganism? What about any of the hundreds of other pagan martyrs who have died for their faith at the hands of Christians and Muslims? Not to mention any of the modern-day Muslim suicide bombers who die for their faiths. People believing something does not make that something true. Let's keep going.
3. If an atheist position is that the universe is the product of chance and necessity instead of the product of intelligence, how can he or she explain the fact that the universe is structured rationally, logically, and with mathematical precision and predictability? Pope Benedict XVI said, "If nature is really structured with a mathematical language, and mathematics invented by man can manage to understand it, this demonstrates something extraordinary. The objective structure of the universe and the intellectual structure of the human being coincide."
So, no, that's not how science works. No, not at all. Your understanding of physics and of science generally is deeply flawed, it would seem. The only reason the universe appears to be ordered is because there's simply so many different things happening and interacting with and upon other things that it looks somewhat orderly until you can both look closer and understand what the results of looking closer would show. Also, you're being disingenuous, as was the Pope you mentioned. The laws of the universe are not inherent to the universe the way the Constitution would be to the United States of America. On the contrary, the laws of the universe are written by men and women of science to explain the ways our universe appears to us to work. You've misrepresented 3 for 3 now. Some form of what you're asking about would need to fundamentally understand.
4. If atheists adhere to the belief that the purpose of human life is merely to procreate and survive, is it possible to determine that human life has any more value than animal life, since animals share the same basic purpose?
Really? The secular humanist position would be that there is no greater purpose for people other than that which they would fashion for themselves. And personally, I agree with that sentiment almost entirely. I also think that what separates us from other animals is our ability to think and use logic and reasoning, which is something that, based on our observations, is entirely unique to humans, at least on Earth.
5. Why have so many atheists determined that the life of a fetus in the mother's womb is less valuable than the life of his or her mother? What standard do they use to value human life?
The same standard that we would use to value any other organism in our body against our will. Should I have to keep a parasite in my body against my will because I was thirsty and drank some water I knew might have a parasite in it? If you were being insistent, the answer would be no. Unfortunately for you, however, the pro-choice position is just that. Pro-choice. It is the belief that a woman should have the right to her own body, as any person, note, not human, but person, should. The pro-life position is not one of pro-life, nor has it ever been. Your position is one of forced birth. Your position is responsible for countless unwanted, unloved, neglected children born into poverty and sent to orphanages and foster homes. Your position is not one of life, but one of hurting both women and children for the rest of their lives.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the fact you stopped by. If you'd like to read more from what I've written or see more videos, you can stay on this channel. Please subscribe. If you'd like to read some of my blogs, please go to christian-apologist.com. Goodbye.
And good riddance. I don't think that she even realizes half of what she spews is completely incoherent. And that what little of it is both coherent and relevant to any sort of discussion is not anything people have not already addressed from these positions countless times prior. There was nothing, almost nothing, she said, that I could not immediately have an answer for. Because I've just done it that many times with people like her. Anyways, this has been Armchair Atheist, and I am signing off.